Welcome everyone. Hi, my name's Steve Barnes and I'm the Aerospace and Automotive Operations Manager here at NQA, and thank you for joining us on this session today, and we hope that you'll be able to take something from this presentation. You'll be able to ask questions throughout this presentation. There's a chat function that you can use to type those questions and then we can get back to them at the end of the presentation. Also, this has been recorded and it will be available on YouTube for you to reference at a later date. And we will also send you a key takeaway document, which you'll receive following this via email. Okay, so let's get straight into the presentation. The standard now mandates the use of the process approach, and to ensure that we test this within the assessment of the organisation, we should utilise process-based auditing, and therefore we need to apply some techniques to do this. This presentation is not a "this is how you must do it" session, but more of a basic overview which, as I've just intimated, includes some tips on how you may go about it. Many of you will already be doing some of this and recognise different elements, but it may help with performing the audit in an order with appropriate questions to establish if the organisation is really performing. Auditors will develop varying methods on how to approach this, but hopefully this will provide a form of foundation to build upon. We have about 20 to 30 minutes of slides, then we can open it up if necessary for some questions at the end. But before we get into the main part of the presentation, let's take a look at what the process approach is. So the definition of the process approach is the application of a system of processes within an organisation, together with identification and interactions of these processes and their management, can be referred to as the process approach. And the advantages of process-based auditing are that it focuses on performance, which is key to this being effective. It demonstrates that priority is given to the questioning of the organisation's identification of processes, their sequence and interactions, and performance against the objectives and measures that have been defined. And it focuses on the processes which directly impact the customer. It identifies issues and trails around the organisation's process for setting objectives and targets. It identifies what plans are in place to ensure targets are met. And it also identifies corrective action plans where objective targets are not being met. It also emphasises the importance of the need to consider processes in terms of added value, obtaining results of process performance, and the continual improvement of processes based on objective measurement. And a key advantage of the process approach is the ongoing control that it provides. So where does this method leave us with the standard? Of course, we need to know what is required of the standard and also have this knowledge so that we can identify deficiencies through the audit process. However, process-based auditing, utilising the aspects of sequence and interaction, will hopefully demonstrate to you that in applying this technique, all of the elements of the standard, i.e. the clauses, will be covered thoroughly. Of course, the standard is built around the pdca cycle, but one of the unique differences this time is that leadership has been put at the heart of everything, and within this session we will look at how top management can be audited to ensure that this has been considered as a fundamental element. Now, as we are all aware, the new standard mandates a process approach which incorporates the pdca cycle and risk-based thinking. And the process approach enables an organisation to plan its processes and their interactions. It also enables an organisation to ensure that its processes are adequately resourced and managed, and that opportunities for improvement are identified and acted upon. Risk-based thinking enables an organisation to determine the factors that could cause its processes and its quality management system to deviate from planned results, to put in place preventive controls to minimise negative effects, and to make maximum use of opportunities as they arise. This grid gives an indication of areas where an organisation should consider and address risk within their activities. As you can see, there are many areas that can be affected by risk. Now let's look at planning for process-based audit. And the first consideration is going to be, what processes will we audit? What you're going to need is the process description that the organisation uses. This is necessary as when you are in the audit environment, you refer to processes in a way in which the organisation recognises them, and also so that within your audit reports, the processes are also easily recognisable. Organisations are also required to determine the sequence and interactions of the processes. But even without these two aspects, as long as you have the process names, you should be able to form the basis for a good process-based audit. For example, you're not going to put purchasing right at the end of your audit. It's logical that this would fall within the plan part of the pdca cycle. The ideal would be that the organisation has put a process and interaction chart or map to aid this process. The following are examples of real process maps from various organisations and countries, but you can see that there should be sufficient detail for you to determine not only the process descriptions, but also the sequence they are likely to follow. Also, of course, in an ideal world, you would have a very good one. But as there's no prescribed format or requirement for a process map, we have to work with whatever information we've got. So now we have some information around the process names, we need to determine what sequence these will be audited in. As I said before, logic should enable us to determine most of this, but the following may help with this. Plan the management-oriented processes first. For example, business plans, objectives, policies, key performance indicators, organisational context, management review, external and internal audit results. And just as a side note, when conducting or auditing management review, of course ensure that the required inputs and outputs are met, but also ensure that the organisation records statements about how robust they consider each element reviewed to be, and where there are improvement actions coming out of the review, that responsibilities and timelines are recorded. Management reviews and subsequent results should demonstrate reactive and proactive approaches to stakeholder concerns or potential risks. Then plan to audit the customer-oriented processes second, which are the most important of the processes because of the interaction that they have with the customer. So processes such as sales and contract review, design, purchasing, manufacturing, release, and complaints. And then finally, the support processes. So activities such as maintenance, calibration, training, problem management, corrective and preventative actions, and IT. Now, a really useful method to plan this information is by using the principles of the V-cycle to auditing. Some of you may have seen this before, but let's take a quick look. If you populate it in a sequence that you have determined utilizing the principles around management-oriented processes first, customer-oriented second, and support third, then it may look something like this. So as you can see, starting with top management, you would have things like strategy, policy, objectives, and the resources that are needed. And then you can move into risk analysis and process planning. And then obviously into the operations where you're doing your transformation of what's required by the customer and recording of the operations and how they're performing. Then along with improvement actions and analysis reporting, you're feeding that information back to top management for review and decisions. So within this particular principle, you've got responsibilities shared, responsibilities assigned, and responsibilities defined. There's management from the top and management at every level. And the organisation must then identify and allocate the necessary resources, but also ensure continual improvement. These are just ad hoc headings that I've put into this, but you could include topics such as organisational context, training, etc. as necessary. It also ensures that the processes are followed from top management down through the organisation, from the process for creating the organisation's strategy and policy and objectives, through to those activities where information, data is collected and analysed and presented back to top management for improvement actions to be considered and implemented. The V-cycle model, in conjunction with the sequence of the processes, also follows the pdca cycle. So that's a way in which a process-based audit can be planned. So let's look at how the audit can be commenced, starting with the questioning of top management, which is going to be good preparation for when the organisation receives a certification body, as this is a particular process that we would carry out when we audit your organisation. But why question top management? Well, because they set the scene for the organisation, but they could also set the scene for elements of your internal audit. It's important for the organisation to know what the strategic direction of the business is and what the context of the organisation is. The organisation should know the industry sector they fall within and if there are any routes into other sectors. What is the size of the organisation, which may be in terms of revenue or people, and where it is in terms of position in its relevant marketplace. In effect, are they a big fish in a small pond or a little fish in a big pond? The organisation should determine this by assessing its risks and opportunity. So ask how this is being done. Perhaps it could utilise a SWOT analysis. Recommend this if something along these lines is not already being done. Within the management of the system and process, there should be an overall focus on risk-based thinking aimed at taking advantage of opportunities which in turn will prevent undesirable results. The identification of risks and opportunities can also help the organisation better develop a business plan, objectives and policy. The organisation should create this business plan with respect to deployment of quality objectives and policy. Ask how the ongoing evaluation of risks and opportunities are being monitored. Ask what is being done when additional factors are identified and how they are captured and updated into the business plan, objectives and policy. The organisation needs to consider the external context of the organisation. Ask how this is being done. Perhaps recommend utilising a pestle analysis, for example, if this has not already been considered. Also, the organisation needs to consider its internal context. So ask about the organisation's values, its culture, the knowledge within the organisation, and the overall performance of the organisation. Also ask about the commitment to effective implementation, internal communication processes, the performance review process, and the understanding of customer requirements. Also, when you're doing your internal audit of the top management, don't be afraid to take the position of the customer and ask about things like delivery and returns, rework, complaints, and efficiency to determine if there are any deficiency or risks within any of the organisation's processes. The outcomes of this interview could mean that you need to amend your audit plans, for example, to prioritise based on the performance data and focus on the processes that are not performing as intended. You can then go on to audit the organisation to ensure that the organisation's process definition, including the sequence and interaction, adequately describes reality. When questioning a process, it is useful to adopt the elements of the pdca cycle, but starting halfway through the process. This is referred to as the cap-do approach. Here is a brief outline of this method. It starts with questions about performance of the process, what is expected and what are the indicators and objectives. It then leads on to how the process is being improved. How was the process planned? Does the process design allow performance objectives to be met? Is it robust? Does it consider previous performance results? And finally, is the process being carried out as designed? So how could we put this into practice? We want the best possible overview of the process, so find out who the process owner is. If we consider a manufacturing process, who's the process owner? Does the MD own the process? Usually a production manager likes to think that they own the process. Or is it Bob that's been working on the process for 20 years? Now for me, if there is somebody like Bob on the process that knows it inside out, then for me it would be Bob for two reasons. One is, as I say, he knows it inside out. And if we consider how the organization captures internal knowledge, it may be useful to know if they've captured the fact that someone like Bob kicks a machine in the bottom right-hand corner at a particular point in the process to make it work. These are all useful things to know. Stand back from the process and ask the process owner to give you an overview, as this will give an indication of the reality of the process. Then test this by questioning the process. So ask, who is the customer of the process and what are their expectations? What are the KPIs, the objectives and the targets for the process? Are these appropriate to the risks that were identified earlier when questioning top management? What are the measurements or performance indicators? What are the results that are being achieved? What is being done to improve the process? What are the inputs to the process? And what are the required outputs? How do they know it's working well? Record details to various process categories. Now we'll come back to this particular point later on in the presentation. So continue asking, is the information correct and up to date? And how is effectiveness and efficiency of the process being monitored? When effectiveness is planned results achieved. Now, this is a customer satisfaction, so it's an external measurement. So you can look at complaints or on-time delivery. But that may not always be the case, because the customer of a particular process can be the next process in your organization also. So you can maybe monitor something internally as well in respect of effectiveness of the process. And efficiency is the results achieved versus the resources used. So this is organizational satisfaction, an internal measurement. So you can look at, for example, machine downtime, things like that. If the process changes for any reason, so if any changes are made as a result of a problem or an improvement project, audit trails must be followed to ensure that all links, inputs and outputs are still appropriate. So have the relevant control documents been updated? FMEA documents, for example, or control plans, work instructions. Has there been a multidisciplinary input so that every possible aspect relating to the change is captured? Does the customer need to approve any changes? Has training been conducted for the changes? And have the changes been effective? And how has this been verified? So now we have a good depth of detail for the process. How could we record the inputs to various process aspects? And how could we audit risk in the process? We all know that the basic definition of a process is whereby we have an input into the process, the customer need, then a process occurs where there is a transformation or a value-added activity, and finally there is an output whereby the customer need has been met. So this is the basic process, but this in effect is the actual process. A process whereby there are many interactions that the process depends upon and needs to function. If you recall earlier, I mentioned about recording the inputs into the process. As you can see from this turtle diagram, and this is only one of the many processes that the organization has, by collating information for each of the sections, you will cover many of the requirements of the standard, and by applying this method throughout the sequence of the organization, the clause coverage is going to be extensive. So where would we start? We start by collating headline information for the different sections as you question the process. So what equipment is being used in the process? Who is involved in the process? What methods, i.e. procedures, records, work instructions are being used? What performance data is being recorded? And what processes support this activity? Following this, you can revisit the various sections to record more in-depth information. And then from this information, we not only need to know how well the process is working, but we also need to establish if there is any risk to the process. If we consider that in place of the arrows that you see moving to the center of the diagram, there is a chain from each of the process interactions, then the risk to this process is that it is only going to be as robust as the weakest link within the interactions. These following slides demonstrate this same technique can be utilized to audit other processes and the coverage of clauses from the standard changes from process to process. So here's one for sales, for example, one for product design, one for process design, one for purchasing. As you can see, it quite literally can be used for any process. So a way in which we could record the detail from a process is to record the information gathered from the initial questioning of the process and then to think about the sections of the turtle diagram. Therefore, for example, note the equipment being used to check maintenance records, including gauges to check calibration records. Another example would be in sales. A computer is probably being used whereby there is the installation and upkeep of the hardware and software. Note people that interact with the process to check competencies. Note drawings, control plans, work instructions, records to check document control and risk mitigation. Note process performance against the objectives and targets that have been set for the process. Then from all of this information, determine if there are any risks and if the process is performing as it is intended. In summary then, audits must verify the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization's processes, including evidence of continual improvement. So look for customer information, so scorecards, reports, claims, KPIs and objectives, their relevance, the results, any trends, and also continual improvement activities. Links or interactions with other processes, and the control of the interfaces, so the inputs and outputs from each process, and the control of risk. But above all, we must focus on performance. So that is the end of this presentation, and thank you for listening. If anybody has any questions that they want to ask, obviously there's a chat function, so you can ask any questions that you want now. You can refer to this, as I said previously, back. There'll be a YouTube recording, so there'll be a link to that on our website also, and we will give you a key takeaway document of this presentation just to help you if you want to refer back. So if anybody has any questions, just seeing if some come through. Okay, there's a question here, can this approach be used also for ISO 27001? Yes, it can. Every single management system standard within an organization, when you implement that, there's going to be a process, you know, right from things like management review, internal audit is a process. you're going to have sales, all of these different aspects. They will all touch varying aspects of each management system standard. So you can utilize this approach for literally any management system. We've also got another question. When you'll receive the key takeaway document, it'll be very shortly following this presentation, but it's normally you receive this within about 24 hours of the presentation. So I would hope that you've got that maybe by close of business tomorrow, latest Monday. Okay. Next question. As the internal auditor within my company, how would I go about auditing internal audit as you're the process owner? Yeah, we encounter that quite a bit. What you're going to need to do is train somebody else, you know, even if it's in very basic principles of internal auditing, so that they can just audit that process for you. You know, in lots of respects, it's a non-conformance, because you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have objectivity, impartiality to a process when auditing it. So that would be the response to that. You just need to ensure that somebody else is trained in that. And the next question, TS 16949 requires auditing checklists. Does this restrict the process audit in your experience? No, it doesn't. You can still utilize a checklist to capture all of this information. You just need to develop those checklists utilizing some of the principles. You don't need to use all of this. Elements that we've gone through today can be used in isolation. You may have your own processes that A, you're used to, B, address process approach. But yes, you can build a checklist of all of these requirements if you do want to. Any more questions? I think that was the last question for now. One that's just popped up. Okay, what would you consider robust evidence when assessing if a process has been risk assessed to a satisfactory degree? Can we demand as an auditor written evidence or just output-based evidence? Well, you're going to have two aspects there. One, you're going to have written evidence anyway. You know, some processes you'll have the individuals on the process recording data, and you can quite quickly see if the machines, etc., are performing and meeting, you know, what we can say specifications for product or output requirements. So you can see from evidence. You can also make justifications for putting in place requirements around them presenting to you, because they have to prove that their process meets requirements also. So you can put that almost back on the process owners. They should have responsibility to ensuring continual improvement of a process. So you can ask them questions around, okay, if you cannot see the information, get the process owners to show you or demonstrate that they're meeting requirements, whether those requirements are of the standard or of objectives set by the organization as well. I'm just trying to see if any more questions are coming up. I think. Okay, what if this machine breaks down? What if this machine breaks down? I'm assuming that's a production machine. It's not quite clear there. If you've got a machine that's breaking down, you need to be looking at your processes, so maintenance processes. Okay, so have you got planned maintenance? Have you got predictive maintenance? Would be one. That's something that obviously the aerospace and automotive industries look at, but it's a good thing to implement in most organizations. If you've got some form of predictive maintenance, you will get the optimum out of your machines and processes. Any more questions coming through? I think we'll just wait a couple of seconds to see if we capture anything. Hopefully you've been able to get something out of this presentation today. There's always links on our website if you need to ask more detailed specific questions about anything we put out, such as this webinar. You can always log on to that. So you can go onto our website and you can look at our blogs that we post on there, and you can ask a question within the blog area of our website as well. So even if you haven't thought of any questions now, you're more than welcome to go on there, ask the question. It gets, although it's on our website, it soon gets filtered through to the appropriate person to pass on to those that may be able to provide an answer for you. Okay, and another quick question's come through. How far should you go to tie in risks and impacts on machine breakdowns to the business continuity plans? It's quite important to do this. Obviously, there's various reasons. One is if you've got any downtime of any description, your organization is obviously, you're losing money, you're losing output, your clients aren't getting what they need. So obviously you need to assess, by using the principles, as I say, of the turtle diagram, you need to assess all of those different aspects that touch a process to make sure that every element is robust. If, for example, you have, let's take a maintenance personnel working on a specific machine and they don't have training or understanding in that machine, then that could be a risk. They could be doing something and it could break down. You need to be checking back to, you know, base training material, base procedures, etc., to make sure that they're in place to ensure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing properly. So in that way, you would obviously, that will help and support your business continuity plan because you are assessing risk in each process. Just seeing if there's any more questions coming through. Okay, time frame for this presentation appearing on YouTube. Again, similar to the takeaway, it should be within the next 24 to 48 hours that you'll see that. The link will be on our website also, so you've got a quick reference point to get into that. Okay. And also the link to this presentation, when we send out the key takeaways document, that will also be in the email, the link to this presentation for you. Any further questions? I think that's it on the questions. Thank you everyone for joining us. As I say, hope it's been of benefit for you, and we look forward to auditing your organisation